Welcome to the Chapter 49 podcast. Today is Thursday, May 16th of 2024. My name is Larry Lannan, communications volunteer for Chapter 49 and a retiree. Chapter 49, of course, represents most IRS employees in the state of Indiana. We're back after taking a week off last week. And now that we are back, we once again welcome our chapter president, Duncan Giles. Welcome back, Duncan.
Thanks, Larry. It's always good to be here.
So I want to say one quick thing before we get started with all of our topics for today. You know, we'll live in the Indianapolis area, and our office is in Indianapolis. Indianapolis is on a sports high the next few days. We're recording this again, as I mentioned, on May 16th. Tonight is the home opener for Caitlin Clark playing for the Indiana Fever, the WNBA team. Tomorrow night, the New York Knicks play the Indiana Pacers in Game 6 of that playoff series. And on Saturday, weather permitting, will be the first day of qualifying for the Indianapolis 500. There's a lot going on. The reason I mentioned sports is that ProPublica is a nonprofit group that does a lot of journalism work. It's as I said, a nonprofit, and they take donations, and they do some pretty good journalism. They had a recent story that I read, Duncan, that these extremely wealthy people that own sports franchises use them for tax write-offs. And they use the example of Steve Ballmer, the man who made an unbelievable fortune at Microsoft, bought the Los Angeles Clippers. And the way you depreciate the purchase price, people pay these humongous amounts of money for a sports franchise, but yet the way they do the depreciation and the way they write off the player salaries and so forth, it's like, okay, here's the amount of money you take in, here's the amount of money you actually pay. You may have a profit in that sense, but on the tax rolls, you've got a big loss. So this may explain why some extremely wealthy billionaires, well, they may like sports and all that too, but there's an added incentive to get some tax breaks in addition to all that.
Absolutely. And as you and I both know from our tax background, that's the thing that people do is they look for those types of loopholes that they can have. And this isn't really a loophole. It's simple depreciation, but they're taking it to an art form. And so, they're like, well, we're not making any money. Okay. And that may be the purpose of this. You're enjoying yourself, but your purpose may be for it to offset other things that you have. So I these sports owners, when they cry poverty, I don't have a great deal of sympathy for them. Like the Kansas City Chiefs, they just had a failed referendum for Arrowhead Stadium to do some improvements there. They needed $800 million to do improvements, and now they're talking about moving. Really? Kansas City's not making enough money there? The Hunt family's not making... Okay.
Well,
whatever you say.
A great example is Oakland, California, which made a reasonable offer to the Oakland Athletics and also to the football team. And the sports clique said, not enough. We're moving away for a better deal. So, I think that there's a lot to be said about that. So it's a big sports weekend. I enjoy sports with the business of sports. By the way, did you know that we talked about the Indianapolis 500, that auto racing tracks have a special depreciation schedule?
No, but that does not surprise me.
And they wouldn't say like, we're going to give a special break to the Indianapolis Motor Speedway. They'll just say, well, we'll give a special break to a 2.5 mile oval track at 16th and Georgetown in Indianapolis. You still get the tax break. Anyway,
and for those who've never attended an event at the Speedway, whether it be the actual race or qualifications or even practice, it's something to be experienced. It truly, truly is. It's just an unbelievable. You can't believe how big it is. It can be sun shining in turn 1 and raining in turn 3. It's that big.
You know, I covered the Speedway several years as a reporter, and I met a lot of sports writers and sportscasters that have been to all the major events, been to the Super Bowl, the World Series, NBA playoffs, NHL championships. They've been to all of those big events. And they will say that even after having seen all that, said the start of the Indianapolis 500 is like nothing else in sports. And
Yeah.
I'll leave, and the crowd is part of it. You know, 300,000 or 400,000 people. It's just hard to imagine that. Well, let's get to our subjects of the day. First thing we want to talk about is something we did discuss 2 weeks ago in our last podcast, the Federal Employee Viewpoint Survey. I actually remembered that, called FEVS or FEVS Survey. It's done government-wide for federal employees by the Office of Personnel Management, the overall HR operation for all of the civilian workforce in the federal government. So I understand there's a big push now on to take this survey, refresh our memory on it and NTEU's view of this.
Yeah, this is one of those things, many moons ago, Larry, you'll recall that IRS had their own personal survey, and quite a few years ago, they switched over to the general survey that comes out, the FEVS survey. I don't believe it serves as well because it doesn't drill down as much to each agency. It's because it goes out to so many different government agencies. It's not as agency specific as I would like, but it's a good indicator of a day, a particular day and time. Not near as good as pulse surveys that we discussed a couple of weeks ago, but it's a good one. The agency is really hoping to get a good attendance. There's, a lot of folks who've been around, especially who've been around quite a while, don't really take the survey. They say nothing ever changes. They don't believe that it's looked at. And I can tell you, being on several teams at this level, at the high levels, it does get looked at. The results do get looked at. Now, does that mean some of the standard answers are going to change? Training's always going to be an issue. Period. End of story. Funding's always going to be an issue. Do we have enough people? You're always going to have your things that are going to be high up, but the more that they can hear about it, the better. The other part of this is, I like it when employees are brutally honest with their answers. If something doesn't work, they should know about it. If something is working, they should know about it. We need to have these answers. I've heard from anecdotal evidence from several sources that it's almost like a competition among the executives of whose division is going to have the highest turnout of, basically folks taking the FEVS survey, which I think is the absolute wrong way to go about it, but that doesn't surprise me. The reason that I and National NTU and Commissioner Werfel all think this is a good idea is because we need this information. If you don't know what's broke, you can't fix it. And again, like I said, there's going to be some issues that we are working on behind the scenes. It's slow. It depends on millions of dollars of funding to get fixed, but it helps. And so I would urge everybody, and the invitations are coming out now. I received mine, I believe, yesterday. Please go ahead, take the survey. Let them know what you think. If it's great, let them know that. If it's not, let them know that as well. So we can get these numbers rolled up and they can take a look and do what they can to fix the issues that employees identify.
You know something, Duncan, I remember when IRS started doing its own survey many years ago, and I was a union official. The union was a part of that in the original invocation of that whole process. And the one thing I remember the most was that the groups would also have meetings and roll up issues, and they would have the survey and all that, and that would kind of be the starting point. We used to have a post of duty in Greenwood, Indiana, that had a terrible problem with the roof leaking. It was leased space, and it went on forever. And it took about a year after we finally rolled up, and it took the survey process to get it fixed, which is a sad commentary on the way IRS, at least at that time, was watching the landlords and how they were taking care of buildings. It took months after that was brought up, but I'm not sure it ever would have been fixed if it hadn't been for that survey. So sometimes it doesn't happen overnight. But
Right.
it's like anything else, Duncan, and you and I have been in union work for a long time. Sometimes you just have to keep pushing until you finally get the right thing done. And so this survey process is a good one. So you were saying, take the survey; it's worth your time.
And that's it. You get time to take the survey, take it, let them know your honest opinion. Don't sugarcoat anything. That's the thing we don't want happening. Just let them know where it happens, and hopefully the issues that are identified can be changed. As you said, sometimes the change is much slower than we want, but it is incremental and it does move up.
I want to move to something else because there's a very proud part of the contract that you were a team negotiating this, and this came up from one of our staff people at NTEU who brought this up because it's been offered in other agencies, and that's the Child Care Subsidy Program. The Child Care Subsidy Program has now been around, what, 2 or 3 years? You can be more specific on that. It's part of the national agreement that was entered into a couple, 3 years ago. And it's eligible for anybody with a total family income of under $150,000. Now, those of us who are in tax law know there are all kinds of definitions of income, right? And amounts and so forth. You can tell us what family income, the definition is a little different on that. But I think the idea was to try to make as many people eligible who would need this help. And let's face it, employers are using child care subsidies all across the board to attract and retain employees, and the federal government and the IRS in particular is trying to use this child care subsidy program as one way of doing that. So I understand a deadline is coming up. So tell us more about that.
Yeah, the deadline is at the end of May, and the IRS has been very good about sending out information about this. So if you have young children that go into daycare and your total family income, that's what they use, not adjusted gross income, but total family income. And if you're looking into this, they'll have the exact definition on there that would include, basically anybody living in the household. It's tiered. I called this the Ken Moffitt part of the contract because Ken is the one who came up with it and pushed it. Our national president, Doreen Greenwald, who at the time was assistant to the president, Tony Reardon, was also on the team and pushing it very hard. And all the NTU chapter presidents were really pushing for this because we know that it works well in other agencies, and it's proven that it's worked well for the IRS. We want to make sure that as many people as possible are able to take care of this and able to use this. One of the things that's happened over the years is we have certain tiers to be able to qualify for this. And as we've gone through the process, we've had side agreements to raise those income levels. So now, if your total family income, if you are under 150, you're going to basically qualify. That doesn't mean you'll get it, but you pass the first qualification stage. Because how they do it now is for those that apply and have a total family income of under $90,000, that's the first tier, then they are going to be able to go ahead and get this. And this can be, up to thousands of dollars per year. So this can be quite a help for folks who have young children in daycare, and especially are lower graded that aren't making that much money, or folks who are new to the service. So if you have young children that you have in daycare and you've got an income of less than 150,000, especially if your family income is less than 90,000, you really want to investigate this because it's a program that's well worth it.
Yeah, you and I could have used that 25, 30 years ago, right?
Absolutely, we could have. That would have been a great help.
And there's no question that your negotiating team and the people in leadership positions in NTEU convince the management not only is it good for employees, but it's good for the agency. And that's, I think, why NTEU sold the management on this program. So please investigate if it's something you could use, or if you know somebody in the IRS who maybe isn't taking advantage of this, who could, try to steer them in the right direction. You can talk to your manager or any union official. We're glad to help you if you think this
Yeah,
might be.
and it wasn't a hard sell. Management was once we explained it to them, management was receptive. So I'll give credit where credit is due at the table. And they, basically it was just, how is the funding mechanism going to work? How much is it going to be? And what are the tiers that are going to be qualifying for it?
Well, that's great when the management says, okay, we agree with it. Now just work out the details. You're more than 90% the way there.
Yep. It was easier than probably arranging debates.
You know, can I make a comment on that, please? For those who aren't paying attention, a lot of people aren't paying attention to the whole presidential thing, but Donald Trump has been saying, telling Joe Biden, I'm going to debate you. I'll debate you anytime, anywhere. So Biden took him up on it. Goes, okay, we're going to do it here and here, you know, and now Trump, oh yeah, we should even do it more. But I don't know about you. They still haven't worked out the details of this. So I am still unsure that these debates will happen, but we'll see.
Yeah, like I said, devil's in the details.
Yeah, they haven't agreed to all the details. Until that's done, why I'm skeptical. Speaking of debates and details, there's a new debate going on in Congress, and telework seems to be a big issue in Congress. There's a new bill that's been introduced in the Senate. It's the Romney-Manchin bill. Interesting that these two guys are not running for reelection and will be out of the Senate soon. But they have introduced a bill that would limit telework to only 4 days of pay period. Now, under our contract, it can be up to 8 days of pay period that you can be teleworking. And they want to limit that even further to 4 days, a bit less than a whole week of work that you could do on telework. So the how should I put this? The argument that these two senators seem to be making is that there's no accountability, that there's no data out there to explain how people are doing their work. I don't know about you, Duncan, but are they just not looking in the right place? I know IRS has data.
I don't believe they want data. I think that they're just basically looking at the fact, and this is a mindset that absolutely infuriates me, where, okay, if employees are not in the office, they're not working. Because some of these folks in the House and the Senate have introduced things like, the Back to Work Act or something like that to eliminate telework. The thought that people who are teleworking are not working is so patently false, it's absurd. Study after study has been done. And what does it show? That people are more effective when they're teleworking than when they're not. Look, if you've got an employee who's screwing off when they're teleworking, I'm going to bet you dollars to donuts they're screwing off when they're in the office. It's not a teleworking issue. It's an issue of making sure people are doing the right thing. The vast majority of teleworkers are much more productive when they're at home without any distractions in the office, without having to worry about a commute, without having to worry about, okay, am I going someplace for lunch? Or am I going to, did I bring my lunch? What's going on? Things of that nature. They're much more focused. They're going to be there. And again, the side benefits, not just the productivity, but the side benefits. Less sick leave used, less FMLA used, less leave without pay used. I mean, it all is a positive thing, but yet you get this mindset, well, they need to be in the office. Well, the people who need to be in the office, who have face-to-face interaction or deal strictly with paper and they can't do something remotely, they are in the office. I mean, that's one of those things. They already are. So it's a solution in search of a problem. And it's mainly because the folks who rent to federal agencies are seeing their spaces reduced because there's not as many people in there. The businesses that depend on federal employees, especially in the capital region area, are, their restaurants and places like that are hurting because the federal employees aren't there. I understand that. I dig that, but they're going to have to figure out another way because, if you start to eliminate telework, all you're going to be doing is driving employees out of federal service. And I can guarantee you that NTU will be fighting against this for all our agencies every step of the way, because we'll continue to show the studies that show telework is more productive than being in the office.
Yeah, and I look at the arguments being made, and you're right. You see this mindset in Congress that if you're not in the office, you're not working. And yet, if you look at all the data that we do have, and this has been studied in the private sector and in the government sector, both extensively, and it's clear people are very productive. There are exceptions, like you said, to everything. If there's some, I mean, I was a manager and I didn't manage people who worked very much telework because I managed taxpayer assistance centers. Unless somebody was on a special project or doing some
Mhm.
other kind of work, they were in the office all the time. So I really didn't have that. But I knew if I had people who were on telework, if I was managing them, you watch their work all the time. And there are plenty of ways to do that. We have the technology to know whether employees are productive. Are they given assignments? Are they hitting their deadlines? Are they producing the work they're supposed to produce? It's not rocket science to measure this. And IRS has been doing this. And I think your point's well taken. If somebody's not doing the job working at home, they're probably not getting it done in the office either. And that employee needs help and needs to, some help to get up to a level of performance where they can be a productive employee. So you and I are on the same page, and NTEU has made it very clear we are going to oppose this Romney Manchin bill or any other bill that comes across. There's one bipartisan bill to to collect data, but I'm not against that. I think that's a good idea, because once these elected officials are faced with the data, maybe, just maybe, they'll have a different approach to this.
Yep. And then there are a couple other fun things in play with this. We've been on a rent reduction up until the last couple of years because, we haven't been hiring. So we've been getting rid of space. So right now there's a lot of hoteling and desk sharing going on. You want to bring everybody back to the office. Where are you putting these people? So you're going to have an issue there. And one of the, I monitor a lot of federal employee chat rooms, and an agency that wasn't identified, but I don't believe it's a NTU represented agency, had a return to office dictate. So they had to return to the office. And then a couple of weeks after they returned to the office, a director was saying, okay, we've got to cut out these water cooler discussions. We're having way too many water cooler discussions. And somebody apparently asked, okay, what's the difference between collaborating, which you guys have wanted, and a water cooler discussion? Can you tell me what the difference is? And they couldn't identify it.
Well, didn't you say that was an argument the IRS made? They wanted water cooler discussions?
Oh, they wanted the collaboration, the collegial atmosphere, the water cooler type discussions, so they could be talking about things. But yet when they get back, it's like, well, they're not as productive as they were. You mean they were more productive when they were sitting at home on telework? Huh, I never made that connection. Every study that's been done would have made it, but that's fine. So I mean, you've got a lot of things that would have to change greatly if some of these folks in Congress got their way about, returning to office. But I just want to absolutely dispel the notion that people who are in the office are not working. They're working as hard, if not harder and longer at home than they are in the office. period.
Oh, yeah, and NTEU will continue to educate our allies on Capitol Hill so they can make the argument that these people who are saying that working at home is not productive, we need to let them know it's just the opposite, and we'll continue to do that. Let's talk about the employee assistance program. We talked about that last time as well. And, I've always, I don't say always, lately have been seeing that I'm not absolutely sure that everyone has totally recovered from that really serious um, shock that we all had to our psyches when we had to deal with COVID. Now, COVID's still around. It's not the crisis it was because there are better treatments for it and so forth. Um, but I would have to say that psychologically, that COVID is still with us. So if people are feeling stressed for whatever reason, whether it's layover of leftover COVID stress or just the normal stress you have with work and trying to balance your personal life with that, there is an employee assistance program available, and NTEU is a big supporter of that, always has been, and encourages employees who need to use it to use that.
Yeah, I'm seeing more and more employees who are stressed about, everything, work life, home life, things of that nature. They're worried about, am I going to have to start making a longer commute again? You know, is my job going to be, taken away from me in a Schedule F situation? Hearing the commissioner give factual information saying, we're doing all this hiring. If you don't fund the IRS properly and give us the money we need, we may have to do, early retirements or buyouts or furloughs or even RIFs down the road, reductions in force, which none of us want. So, employees are feeling more and more stress. And, as anybody who's listened to this program knows or knows me, I'm a huge, huge, huge believer in mental health. You've got your physical health that you need to take care of. You've got to take care of your mental health as well. I'm extremely proud of my daughter, who's a mental health counselor, who, tries to help people in these types of situations every day. And, that it can relieve so much stress from you. And it can be such a great thing to talk to somebody about these issues. So don't hesitate to reach out to the folks in the EAP. You get free counseling lessons. If you feel overwhelmed, if you feel super stressed, take advantage of that, please. It can help you.
Our final topic today, it's a word that I heard a lot as a union official. I certainly learned it a lot in all the training and all this, all that I dealt with as a manager as well. The word is communication. We have more tools for communication today than we've ever had. We have email, we have voicemail, we have Teams, all these communication tools, and that's just a few of them that we can use. Yet, Duncan, are we really doing a better job of communicating, even with all these tools right here on our hand?
I think right now we're doing way less with more. Like you said, we're connected as much as ever, but we don't really seem to be talking to each other. I can't tell you the number of issues that I have with employees and managers that don't communicate. Sometimes the manager is a very poor communicator, doesn't get back to their people, or the way that they talk to their people is, we've had a case in this past week that's just been shocking. And when you tell them the emperor has no clothes, for some reason they're not happy. But on the flip side, I hear from managers saying my employees aren't letting me know, if they need to be off or something of that nature. They're not letting me know. They're just taking off, or they're just disappearing, or things of that nature. You have to communicate with each other. You have to communicate with your manager. Your managers have to communicate with you, let you know. That's one of the things I've really appreciated in my years of NTEU is everybody in the organization from top to bottom communicates with each other. We let each other know what's going on. We try and give out information. This podcast, I think, is a perfect example of communication. We try and get out as much information as we can, especially on topics we think are going to be of interest to the folks that we represent, either here locally or NTU represents across the country. So it's just, please take the time to think about, if you are not communicating well or having issues or something like that, if you're having issues communicating with your manager doesn't communicate, talk to your local union chapter, get them involved, let them try and talk to the manager to see what the issue is. And, let's all try and communicate better, not talk past each other, listen to each other, and fix the issues that are there.
Okay, Duncan, time for your final comment.
My final comment plays a little bit into communication, but it's mostly about relationships. I want to congratulate you on you and your wonderful wife Jane just celebrated an anniversary. Jane deserves combat pay, much as my wife Kim does, for a much shorter period of time. But it's so nice to have that person in your life, whether it be your partner, whether it be a child, whether it be friends, that you can depend on, that you can be with, that you can count on. And that is something that I am so thankful that I have in my life. I know you're thankful to have Jane and your children and yours and your extended family with your son-in-laws, your grandchildren, things of that nature. That I just think, again, for mental health, it's a wonderful thing to have. If you're single and you don't have anybody and you're happy with that, God bless you. I think that's great. Go with it. But, if you are in a relationship with somebody like that and you have it really good, let them know. Tell them how much they're appreciated. Let them know how much you love them. Never go without saying that, you love them, you appreciate them, you respect them, because you never know when the time is going to be, when it's going to be the last time you're going to be able to say that. And you never want to let it be left unsaid.
Yes, Jane deserves the Congressional Medal of Honor, as a matter of fact, for putting up with me for 33 years. How she's done that, I do not know. Actually, what I want to talk about is not too far off yours. I mentioned that I, in my retirement, write a local news blog in Fishers, Indiana, suburb of Indianapolis, where I live. Because local news is so hard to find, I do it as a volunteer. And our mayor is named Scott Fadness, and he gave a State of the City address a while back and told a story of a man that lived in a home, nice home here at Fishers, but the neighbors noticed that the deck was unkempt. There was something that didn't look right. It just that hadn't been kept up well. You can look at the outside of the house and see it wasn't well kept up. They'd knock on the door and never get an answer. Well, so they finally the city did a welfare check. Man opened the door, and this man was in awful shape. We're not even sure he's been eating if much of anything. The place was a mess. Uh, he just lived all by himself and just stayed to himself, and was probably in some kind of a crisis mode. And he used that example as a way of describing a crisis in America. It could happen anywhere, even in a nice suburb of a city. And that's loneliness. Loneliness is a really serious epidemic in this country. And I think we need to have something like what I'm seeing and I'm going to talk about right now. There are two politicians that are on opposite sides of the political spectrum. One is a Republican governor of Utah. His name is Spencer Cox, and a fairly progressive Democratic senator from Connecticut, Chris Murphy. Normally would not even probably have any reason to talk to each other, but they somehow got together and realized that it was not a part of political philosophy that we have a crisis of loneliness in this country, and this feeling of isolation has grown for a long time. So political ideology left aside, they came together trying to find ways to integrate people into their own local communities, kind of like our mayor said. His point was, we need to make sure if there are people who are struggling out there and they're lonely, they're all by themselves, that we need to try to reach out and connect these people with their local communities. And I think the point of Senator Murphy and Governor Cox were, hey, government can't fix the problem, but the government can help a little bit. After all, it was the Declaration of Independence that said we all have the right to a pursuit of happiness, right? And that's their basic point. So loneliness is a real problem. And if you know somebody in your neighborhood that you haven't seen or talked to, reach out. Just connect somebody with their neighborhood, friends, local community, just how much that can have an impact in America. People feel disconnected and lonely, bad things can happen. And that's my final comment. And Duncan Giles, thank you so much for being a part of our podcast. As always, it is the Chapter 49 podcast. We try to keep it weekly, even though we weren't here last week, and that was my fault. I was visiting family at the time, and I thank you for allowing me to do that. So we hope to be back next week. And again, we thank you for watching and listening. We know it's a part of your time, and time is valuable, and you've taken time to watch or listen to this podcast. If you like it, let other people know. In the meantime, take care, be safe, be kind.